Welcome to Paranormal M, the realm of the inexplicable wonders and paranormal phenomena. Subscribe and turn on notifications to become part of our supernatural exploration. We hope you're ready to be spellbound by our collection of ghostly encounters and eerie tales. The story of my haunted childhood cottage. My mom had me young, at 15. So while I was still a baby, we lived with my grandmother in her cottage home in a smallish town west of the beach in Ontario, Canada. It was a cute blue 2-story cottage with a big forest out back. A little after the time I was born, in 1996, my grandmother had become estranged from her father. But he kept saying how badly he wanted to meet me. He died shortly after. One of my earliest memories was laying in bed with my grandma, having a nightmare, waking up, and her going to get me a glass of milk. The room was dimly lit, but I could still make out everything in the room. However, in the dark doorway, I saw a tall, almost translucent figure standing there. It wasn't moving. Didn't have any identifying features. It was just there. Like it was staring at me. When my grandma returned with my milk, it vanished. When I got older, I told my mom and grandma about this encounter. My mom told me that when I was still a baby, we were in the basement. I was in my swing chair. She was sitting on the couch and she said everything happened all in one moment. The dog started barking, a VHS tape that was enclosed in a click-lock glass case opened and flew across the room. I started crying. My mom was nowhere near the VHS tape and the glass cabinet couldn't be opened on its own. My grandma shared that once I was old enough to talk, she was bathing me in the bathroom. I asked her who the man standing behind her was. She turned and there was no one there, but I was laser focused on him. Anyways, we all think it was my estranged great-grandfather. He didn't do anything malicious, he just wanted to make his presence known and to meet me. After these incidents, nothing out of the ordinary happened that anybody can remember. Although, when I went back to visit in the summers growing up, I can distinctly hear footsteps in the middle of the night walking around when no one else was awake. I saw a dead principal in his house and never forgot it. Some years ago, I was at a biker party. My dad is in the Marine Corps in the bike club. Think big burly men with beards and leather vests, drinking beer and barbecuing. Anyway, every person is dressed that way. T-shirt, leather vest, blue jeans, and boots. This house was somewhere around Pensacola, Florida. It was deep in the woods around a creek. Since we were outside, I asked where the restroom is. The wife of the biker who owns the home tells me, and I go alone upstairs, where not a soul was. I turn to go into the bathroom, and I'll never forget. A tall man with black slicked hair, white button-up shirt, black slacks, dress shoes. They were leaning over the sink and looking into the mirror. Totally solid. Not moving at all. Looked like a human. I thought he was dressed so strange for the party, but I ended up using the restroom, or rather not using the restroom because he was in there. I go back to the lady that told me where the restroom was, and I said, "Who's that man in the bathroom?" I described him and her eyes went huge as she looked spooked. She then told me the principal of the school lived and died in that home. And I apparently described him accurately. She told a lot of people around us it was so remarkable at that time. I didn't go back upstairs alone after that. The only solid apparition I've ever seen. Knocking on furniture inside 2 places I've lived. When I moved into my first apartment, I've experienced a lot of knocking at night. Since I was up late a lot, think like 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., playing games online and talking, I've had on a near nightly basis knocking coming from a corner of my living room. Usually it would be 3 knocks in succession, each separated by a quarter or half a second. I thought for the longest time that it was my downstairs neighbor hitting at the ceiling because I was talking at night. This kept going for like 2 or 3 years straight. Only when I moved out I realized when moving my IKEA TV stand that by applying pressure on the top wood piece, it would give off the exact knocking sound, making me realize it came from that thing all along. It was too rhythmically timed, as if it could have been the wood expanding from heat, cold, or moisture. This was the first time I truly believed in some kind of spiritual activity. I used to find it interesting, but never paid actual, attention to believe in it. I've also had those knockings happening on a new fridge, which I also bought when I moved into that place. But that I rationalized by how I thought a fridge worked. Though at times, it was really hard knocks, nearly a banging and popping, but usually not timed. After I moved, I slept in the same room as the kitchen, and at night, again, there were noises coming from the kitchen. Also some kind of knocking, but it usually appeared when I left bed to go to the bathroom. One would think my movement might have caused some kind of effect on the wood in the kitchen, even though it was concrete. Now the weird part is that even my intent, which I tested numerous times by slowly lifting myself up in bed, would instantaneously result in a knocking. I'm truly convinced that those were real, paranormal events anyway. Maybe I should mention that it happened on 2 continents, Europe and North America, at which I lived for several years each. Now, back in Europe for 3 years, haven't had any experience ever again like that. I also tried communicating in the second place I've lived in, asking for a sign or maybe a knock on my command, but to no success whatsoever. My question, which is why I created this post, does or did anyone else experience the same? Do you think this has followed me, or is this considered a generic form of haunting? Friendly ghosts in my childhood home. I have a lot of ghost stories to tell about my childhood home, but I'm going to dive into just one. Just a little bit of background. My house was built in 1880 and has a lot of history around it. In every room, there's a doorbell right next to the entryway. It all connected to this device in the kitchen that would buzz and say which room it was coming from. When I was a kid, the doorbell still worked in every room, and you could hear it around the house. We knew that it was for the servants that used to work in the house over 100 years ago. My house also had 2 staircases, one quote-unquote main staircase and one that connected right to the kitchen, which is off of my room. I often hear people going up and down the stairs when no one's there, and voices. We have a big family, and my sister and I used to share a room right next to the second floor. We had twin beds that were parallel to each other. In this story, I was probably 8 and my sister was 7. One night I wake up and I'm so thirsty. I could feel how dry my throat was. All I wanted was my mom to come in and give me a glass of water. All of a sudden I see my door lightly open and a woman dressed in traditional servant clothing, black dress, white apron and hat, with a blue hue. They glide over to my bed, and they're holding a silver platter with a silver teacup and kettle on it. I remember trying to grab it and then lightly falling back asleep. I wasn't scared or nervous. In fact, I was very calm. The next day I wake up thinking it was some crazy dream, so naturally I wanted to tell my sister, who I thought was sleeping right next to me at the time. Before I even begin telling my story, she tells me that she saw a blue woman next to her bed handing me a silver platter. I couldn't even speak, I was so shocked. Our stories lined up almost exactly. Unexplainable experience in the mountains in Wales. Recently this summer, I was hiking with a friend up a mountain. While on the trip exploring a range in the Dee Valley area. It was morning time, a nice temperature, good visibility and dry, perfect hiking weather. We were well prepared with a rucksack full of additional layers, food and water. We're both pretty experienced, yet amateur hikers. Anyhow, we're walking very slowly up the mountain and it starts getting colder. We think it's just a change in weather, so we put on some additional layers and we keep going. Anyway, we made good progress, but as we kept going, we got this foreboding feeling, like we weren't welcome there. We both had goosebumps and were super quiet because it just felt like anything could happen. At the same time, visibility is getting poorer, to the point where a gloved hand in front of our face was barely visible. We had to hold hands not to lose each other. Then all of a sudden we hear a woman scream. I can't explain to you the agony and pain in this scream. It sounded as if the woman was going through something indescribable. We both froze and then shit ourselves and started coming back down as quickly and safely as we could. As we go down, it gets warmer and clearer, and the atmosphere less foreboding. When we got to the bottom, I looked back up the mountain, not a cloud in sight. Where did this fog come from? We immediately jump in our car, lock the doors, and drive off. Once we're safely away, my partner opens a rucksack to get out sandwiches that we packed this morning. All our food is gone. We check my rucksack. All the food gone. Water and additional layers still there. Now we thought maybe we just, brought our additional layers and we dropped the food. That whilst that may be possible for some of the food, other bits of food were kept in separate compartments, so that didn't make any sense. We thought maybe we had forgot to pack it in the morning, left it in our Airbnb kitchen, but we were sure we packed it, and besides, nothing at the Airbnb when we got back. Ghost truck. This was like 2 months ago, but it's by far the worst shit I've ever experienced. And I've been in 1800s farmhouses that make The Exorcist look like a fucking tea party. Me and my boss were coming home at around 4 a.m. down the secondary highway and fuck all nowhere, when this 70s F-350 hauling ass, like 140 kilometers an hour, came straight for us and disappeared. My boss didn't say a word for the next 16 hours until I showed up for work the next day. He told me to fuck off, threw the truck keys on the roof. I bring it up with a few of the locals at the nearest town a week later. They fucking lost their shit. All of them were like, "You've seen it too, I swear I wasn't tripping." And shit like that. That's when I realized this shit goes deeper than I thought. So last night I was in my basement, and I swear to fucking God, I saw an old dude wearing a torn up flannel with no legs and a quarter of his head gone. Hauled ass up the stairs into my neighbor's house because fuck that shit. I've always felt followed while alone down there. Our two pit bulls will not even go downstairs, and the fastest I've ever seen them run was back up the stairs. My dad says that he hasn't seen shit ever, which I refuse to believe. Apparently the motherfucker in the basement matches the description of the dude driving the truck, so I don't know what the fuck's going on. Saw my dead mother-in-law in a dream. My mother-in-law died in September of 2022. It was emotional for the whole family, and we still feel her loss deeply. Now, I've been with my husband for almost 18 years now, so we were close. His family knows that I'm a practicing witch, and they all accepted me and loved me for it. My mother-in-law especially loved anything paranormal herself, as much as I do. A month after she died, I had a dream. It was her and I in a very dark room standing next to each other. The only light was over my husband on the far side of the room. He wasn't looking at us. She was crying and saying, "He can't hear me anymore. Why can't he hear me? I want to talk to him, but he can't hear me." I told her that he couldn't hear her anymore because something bad had happened, her passing. And he wasn't as receptive to the other side as I am. He blocks it out on purpose. She cried and tried to get his attention, but he still couldn't hear her. She was extremely distraught that he couldn't hear her anymore. I woke up in the middle of the night crying myself. I told my husband about it the next day. I told him that there was something that she wanted to say to him, but she didn't tell me what it was. So he needed to start paying attention to signs. For about a week after that, every time we were in the car together, my Spotify would play Papa Roach songs. She was a huge fan, and they listened to the band together a lot. I finally got a hold of a medium, and I did eventually get her messages from my husband, myself, her son, my son-in-law, and my father-in-law. It was very emotional, to say the least. I won't go into details about the messages because they're private, but suffice it to say that the medium told me things that only we and my mother-in-law would know. It was a surreal and comforting experience. Either way, I thought you guys might enjoy a story about my witchy encounter with the afterlife. Maybe a haunted doll. I live in a relatively small town, like one of the ones where everybody knows everyone. And in my town, there's this elderly woman named Charlotte. She's babysat most of the town. Most of us just refer to her as Aunt Lottie. So Aunt Lottie likes to talk to people, and most of us have no problem indulging her. She's very sweet and likes to show off her grandkids, despite the fact that most of us know them already. A year ago, she caught me on my way home from work. She gifted me a doll. She said she'd been trying to clean out her attic and found it in a box with some other childhood toys, and she remembered that I had mentioned collecting them and wanted me to have it. I didn't fix it up. I was still new to restoration and scared of ruining it. So I actually quite liked the story of the small breaks that gave it. But she did become the centerpiece on my fireplace. Pretty much the day after I brought her home, I started hearing things. just the occasional children's giggle followed by either the sound of running feet on wood or a child's voice humming. And on one occasion, followed by the sound of someone playing the flute very badly. I didn't really think anything of it, like maybe I have hallucinations already, so I just chalked it up to another one and took my pills as usual. And so that's how I live until last week. My sister's visiting from out of town, and I offered to lend her my spare bedroom since no one else was using it. So I pick up some overtime near the end, and I get a call from my sister who's very obviously panicking. Can't make out anything that she's saying over the phone, so I get the okay from my partner to leave early and just check on her. Well, I get there, and I find that she's locked herself in the room. When I help her calm down and get her to tell me what happened, it very quickly becomes clear that those noises I've been hearing aren't actually hallucinations. I've had my house checked since, and it's not carbon monoxide. It's kind of what I was first worried about. I also don't think it's dangerous, unless it's something that needs you to be aware of it first, since I've heard them for nearly 2 years now, and while doing some odd things have happened to, me, none have been against my life. I would mostly just wake up to find my glasses broken only for them to be fixed again when I got home from work. Maybe a rug or a mug suddenly being flipped upside down, stuff like that. I'm not a firm believer or disbeliever in anything, and I don't really have any experience with anything paranormal, so I really just want to know if anybody's has some insight into what I should do and whether I should be concerned. I think my dad's house is haunted. I used to live with my dad till I decided to live with my mom a few months ago. I think my dad's house is haunted. My uncles, one of my uncle's girlfriends, started living with us as well. She mostly stays in my uncle's room, but Grandma, Grandpa, Dad, and my stepmom all live in the same house, including me. I'll just give them names. Dad is going to be D, uncles U1 and U2, the girlfriend G, Grandma and Grandpa G1 and G2. As the narrator, I'm just gonna give them names myself. What makes me think that my dad's house is haunted? Well, to start it off, I always sleep on the couch. And something my one uncle and my grandma would sleep in the living room on the floor with me. One night I was awake, and so was my grandma. I was trying to fall asleep when we heard these really loud footsteps coming down the stairs. Mind you, the stairs are made out of wood, but the floor isn't. And so we thought it was just, my dad. We looked over in the direction of the footsteps to see no one. I didn't really know that Grandma was awake at the time. I only knew once she told me that my dad the next day was like, I was also awake. There was also this time where it was in the middle of the night. I heard footsteps and I pretend to fall asleep thinking that it was my dad. But then I literally heard the footstep in front of me, but I could see no one. I couldn't process what was happening, so I just covered my body with a blanket. I would also see shadows in the corner of my eyes. Sometimes they would be in the corner of the door, or sometimes in the middle of the room. Sometimes I would see something move in the corner of my eyes as well. One of my grandmas on my mom's side, my mom and dad, they're divorced, once visited me, and she said that she had seen a little kid peeking on the stairs. She herself has already seen spirits. It is very spiritual. Sometimes I would sleep in my other uncle's room if he's on a business trip. It's already happened 2 times, but I've heard voices in my pillow. I wasn't really about to fall asleep at the time, but maybe it's because I was half dreaming. Oh wow, I didn't expect for this to be this long, but oh well. I've never experienced it again after living with my mom. The shadows, voices. Nothing. Actually nothing. cat has a doppelganger. Where I live, we have many stray cats in the area. One day, a skinny black cat came to me meowing to come inside. I started feeding him every day and eventually got used to being inside. And let's advance ahead now. It's been 4 years, and he's healthy and loves staying inside as much as out. He's an older black cat, not sure what age he is. He loves to sleep in my room at night, and I keep a nightlight on. He loves to not fully be in the dark. He'll sleep on a small padded chair I keep in my room against the wall in front of my bed. I first noticed this one night about a year ago, thinking that I was dreaming. My cat was sleeping in his chair, and below the chair toward the floor was a dark mass as well. It was the spitting image of the black cat. It seems to mimic what he does. When I get up to go close it, it'll always be gone. I see this thing or entity quite frequently, and it's usually always somewhere near the cat. I saw it cleaning its paws and face, and this was below the chair as my cat slept. I could see its pointy ears flicker as it moves its paws over them. I've seen this so many times now, I don't even get scared anymore. Having nightmares after meeting a girl. So around 6 days ago, one of my junior from college just asked me to meet. We also met 3 times earlier. So I remember I wore a full black hoodie and dark denim jeans and went to pick her from her home, and her home is in like a high populated area, but just a while before her home there's also a place with trees, greenery, and mostly empty area. So I went to pick her. She said she'll be around that green area, because of course she don't want anyone to see her going out with a man. And I waited near that place for some time. She didn't reach there, and hence I went ahead to look for her, then came back there for like 3 times. But then I asked her to share the location, and after picking her up, he went to a fruit chocolate store, sat there around 1 hour, and we went back home. After then, on that night, I saw a really fucked up dream. A female in white clothes, open hair is revolving around my house and asking that the rituals is gonna happen. On the second day, the next day, again got much worse dream that a ghost is on a streak to kill all peoples in my house. 2 are already dead and on a hunt for the 3rd. Then on 3rd day, I saw none horrific but a dream of someone warning to me not much friends. On 4th day, after meeting her, I saw a dream that someone's doing exorcism on me. But then I figured out this all went to a temple near our home, meditated there, and after then, I'm not having any dreams. Well, I'm happy for you, sir. Did I see a demon? This happened earlier this year. One night I woke up to my phone ringing at 3 a.m. It was a woman I had just met asking to hang out. I had a bad feeling about it immediately. I guess I'm really stupid because I agreed. I know I'm lucky I didn't get killed. We get to her friend's house and I instantly regret ever meeting her. Her and her friend start doing drugs. She kept saying it was just Adderall, kept trying to get me to smoke it. Her friend then tells me it's meth. No, I didn't do meth. Her and her friend start arguing about, well, everything. I begin to call for an Uber. At this point, they've been yelling at each other for 20 minutes and they're arguing about a selfie she took. Her friend kept saying she edited this picture. Why are you such a liar? She kept saying that she didn't edit the picture and that it was her mom in the photo. They show me the photo in hopes I can settle their argument. It's a selfie of a woman standing with her back turned to a mirror. I immediately noticed the photos of her before meth when she was healthy. She looked like a completely different person. However, there was something standing in the mirror behind her. It clearly was not of this world. It was a bony, dark, humanoid entity with no face. Immediately, I got the hugest chills all over my body, and it felt like all the blood had drained out of me. It looked attached to her. I was so disturbed that I got zero sleep, took myself to an Orthodox church that morning, sobbing as I walked in. Later, I called my best friend and told her about it. She said that one time she did mushrooms and saw the demon attached to her ex-boyfriend who used to be addicted to all sorts of drugs, including meth. Perhaps it's easier for demons to exploit drug addicts. I don't know. It could also be that the photo was edited, but it didn't look like it to me. Nevertheless, scared the fuck out of me. Someone sat in my bed. Before I get into this story, I would like to affirm that everything said is 100% and a real experience I had. In the following months, I've been trying to debunk this in any way, but I have yet to be successful. For some context about the place and time, this story takes place in Charleston, South Carolina, specifically the Isle of Palms, during a family vacation in September 2023. We stayed in a rental home that I won't name for privacy and potential legal reasons, just a few steps away from the ocean. I shared a room with my mother, which had 2 twin-sized beds. To start off, even before we get to the title of this story, the moment we arrived at this vacation home, the door slammed shut, almost smashing my grandmother's hand. This could be explained by the door being heavy, I guess. But that doesn't explain why every night we stayed at this location the doors would open and close themselves. No matter if the doors were locked, had stuff in the way. The main culprit of the door opening and closing was my bedroom door. I was sick at this time, and I had a very poor sleep schedule, so I'd usually stay up at odd hours. My mother was staying in the same room as me. She would lock the door every night so I didn't make any noise to wake her up. Without fail, however, that door would slam open. I would close it again, and an hour or so later it would slam open again. This even happened right in front of me a few times. Please note that the opening and closing was not limited to that one door. Every door in the whole place would do this. Just mine was more prevalent than the others. For example, my grandparents' room opened just to creak and stop the second I looked at it. Anyway, now that all this is out of the way, let me discuss the thing that sat in the bed with me. Around our 5th day of our stay, I was very tired after returning from a large dinner. I decided it would be best to try to take a short nap while the rest of my family went out to the beach for a while. This would turn out to be a huge mistake. Everyone left one by one. I could hear the large door open and close as each person left. The house was quiet for around 30 minutes. I had not yet fallen asleep, but I had covered my head in a blanket, something that usually helps me fall asleep. After a short time under this blanket, I felt a depression in the bed, a very distinct sensation of someone sitting with their hands on each side of their body. Keep in mind, this is a very small, twin-sized bed. If this were one of my family members, I'd be able to feel them brush against my body. However, the only thing I felt was the indentations on the bed. From what I could tell, it felt like a small woman sitting down. Not a lot of weight, but just enough to definitely be able to feel them sitting next to me. They said nothing, did nothing, didn't even move. This shocked me, obviously. After a few minutes, whatever it was making the indentation on the bed seemed to stand up and leave. I did end up falling asleep after this by some miracle. However, my fever had gotten much worse. Please let me know if you have any ideas or have had a similar experience. I would say I'm more of a skeptic, but this was kind of crazy to me. My paranormal experiences. I have many experiences I consider paranormal in the house where I live, especially when I was a kid and a teenager. Before I was born, my mom has a bunch of weird experiences, especially in her room. She tended to wake up because of tachycardia, always at 4 a.m. and see shadow people. A couple of times they tried to approach her, but she says a white light circle-shaped thing appeared, and they disappeared when this light arrived. Once she didn't want to open her eyes because she knew she was going to see them, so she wanted to hold my father's hand. My dad's tall, so he has big hands. But instead of that, she feels a small hand, like a child's hand. There were no children at home. She says that this presence didn't scare her and held the hand tightly, but it let go of her hand gently. Then she and my dad moved to another room. I know this could have been nightmares or sleep paralysis, but what I've seen are not nightmares. It all started when I was around 10. Things used to fall from their places, but not in a normal way. You know, sometimes we'd leave things very close to the edge of tables or shelves. This was not like that. Stuff that nobody had touched and was not close to the edge would fall, but not in a normal way either, as if someone threw it, like a projectile motion. That happened with my toys, with my books, many times. Sometimes we saw it, and sometimes we find stuff on the floor or heard it falling. Once my cousin Patty was visiting, and we and my parents were going to have lunch at a restaurant. My parents had some stuff to do, so Patty, who's older than me, and I went back. She went up the stairs before me. I clearly saw that she went to the kitchen. Well, I saw someone going to the kitchen directly to the refrigerator when I arrived. When I got to the kitchen, there was no one there. She was at the bathroom. The experience I remember the most happened the day they celebrated my 11th birthday. After my party, my mom went to a job dinner. My school friends went home at like 6 p.m. There were some candles and snacks left there, so my cousins, Liz, Fiorella, Sandry, and Patty, I decided to play with some dolls, saying that it was their birthday. It was like justification to eat the leftovers. So we went to that room I mentioned before, where my toys and PC were. Liz was like 18 at that time, so she didn't really want to play with us. So she was expecting some time playing games on the PC. We let 2 of my dolls sit down in chairs at the end of the room. One was a normal doll, the other was a 75-centimeter doll. Those were popular a long time ago. We were playing a game where you dance, and when the music stops, you gotta stop dancing in that moment, and don't move like you're a statue. We asked Liz to be the one who turned on and off the music. We were playing for like 30 minutes, and suddenly we all looked at the dolls. The big one moved by itself. Like an invisible hand was holding it and threw it to the floor. The 5 of us saw the same thing. We all ran away from the room. Sometimes it was difficult to stay at home. We could feel an awful atmosphere. It was heavy and dark. My family's Catholic, so they called a priest to bless the house and paid for a mass of souls. Purgatory. Never heard of that before. paid for a mass for souls of purgatory. The same day of the mass, I was playing PlayStation with my cousin Liz. We saw how a video game instruction book moved without anybody touching it on a table. After that day, those kind of things stopped to happen little by little. I'm not into any religion, but I do believe in good and evil. Maybe the visit of a priest helped. We don't live there anymore. We moved long ago. Currently, my dad rents that house, and the tenant hasn't complained. So I guess maybe nothing happens now. But despite all the stuff being stopped, I would never live there again. I just wonder if someone here has had any similar experiences. The lights my mom saw, if it wasn't sleep paralysis, things falling. This is the first time after more than 20 years I've read about this on the internet. It's something I don't tend to tell any of my friends. Is my boyfriend right? So about 2 weeks ago, I went through a solid 3 days of god-awful sleep. On the first night, I had a nightmare that woke me up while I was in bed with my boyfriend. Then the second day, I physically couldn't sleep. Finally, the third day, I believe, I had experienced sleep paralysis for the first and hopefully last time of my life. I remember it vividly. I quote-unquote woke up. Felt like my mouth was dry as all hell. Couldn't speak. Like I couldn't move my mouth even slightly. Nothing would come out. Then I noticed my door was open and there was a shadowy figure that was kind of human but also very blurry standing in my bathroom. By the way, my room directly faces the bathroom. And I just began to feel so goddamn scared. Then I saw it kind of move slowly from the bathroom into my room. Then I tried to scream and thrash around in my bed, but nothing was happening at all. Then as it reached my door, it morphed into my boyfriend. I just felt it instantly calmed. I tried reaching out to him and talking to him, but I still couldn't move or speak. Then as soon as I felt a slight movement in my arm, and I just shot awake and realized that my dad had been calling me to wake up. I went through my day normally, but could just remember the dream. I was trying to figure out what happened, or to forget it, but it just wouldn't and still won't fade. I messaged my boyfriend about it last week, and he said that it sounded like sleep paralysis, that I'd gotten so frightened of the figure that my brain managed to change it into something less frightening. However, I have no idea if that's even how it works. If anyone experienced anything like this, I'd greatly appreciate any advice or confirmation on what happened. The call center clairvoyant. So a few years ago, I worked at a call center. Specifically, I took overflow calls, which basically means when a company is too busy to take their own calls, we pretend to be them and take it for them. But here's the thing. We dealt with thousands of companies. We'd literally pretend to be a new company every single call. And we also had a lot of staff, so that's going to be important to know. So anyway, one day I receive an overflow call from a sofa company. I pretend to be the sofa company, answering how the sofa company would answer. But then the caller says, "I'm glad I managed to get through to you." I was like, oh yeah? Do you want a catalog? Because we weren't really the sofa company. I always just tried to do the bare minimum, like send someone a catalog by going to the company's website, ordering it, which anybody could do instead of just fobbing them off with a callback from the real company. But then she said something I didn't like one bit. "No, I actually don't even want a sofa. I just wanted to speak with you, specifically." I was like getting weird chills at this point, because just to put things into perspective, the chances of her getting through to a person she wanted to get through in this overflow company were astronomical. She could have dialed 1,000 times and never reached me. Anyway, I was like, okay, so what is it you're after? And then she said to me, firstly, I just want you to know that your dad's surgery goes well next week. And I know your nan's worried, but you're going to become closer than you've ever been before. And that's saying something, because I know you're close now. I love your guinea pigs, by the way. I saw them too. I don't remember exactly what I said after. This was a few years ago now, but I remember ending my sentence with, saw them how? To which she said, I died. Many years ago in a car accident. When they brought me back, I saw things. My shift had ended at this point, but we kept talking anyway. If she was an old friend, maybe, but truth is, I was worrying about my dad. All day, just during my shift in fact, but somehow, I believed her, that he would be fine throughout his surgery because of what she had said. You could say someone was having a laugh with me, but no one in the company knew my dad was having surgery, or that I was close to my nan, or had guinea pigs, nor is there an outbound call option on our computers. Or you could say that it was a friend that doesn't work for the company then. But no one outside the company knew which companies I took calls for, much less this random sofa company. As I said before as well, the chances of getting through to a specific person you wanted to talk to was next to impossible. One minute I'd be a sofa company, the next part of an accident lawyer company. The next minute I'd be buying shoes for some old lady. Still can't explain exactly how it happened. I told my parents, and them being super religious thought that the devil had spoken to me through the call. But this lady was nicer than anything. Anyway, there's my story. It was the only interesting thing that ever happened in that call center. Aside from the possible devil thing, I find that job to be terrifying in and of itself. I couldn't tell you the number of times I'd call someplace thinking, I don't think you actually work there. I think that you're completely lying to me. And your story makes my thoughts true. Thanks for telling me that. Possibly a haunted painting. Around when I was 14, I had to stay with my grandparents while my house was getting an addition. The house was small. I had to sleep in the pull-out couch in the living room. There's a long hallway connected to the living room where all the bedrooms are, and at the end of it, there's a painting of a woman. She's sitting and just looking directly ahead of her, in the way that if you looked, you can make eye contact. One night I woke up and turned to the hallway. I saw my grandma sitting facing the wall. I kept watching because I was wondering what my grandma was doing. She didn't move for a while. I kept looking at the clock, and this was happening for around half an hour, but eventually she disappeared. I asked my grandma about it the next day. She said she'd never had done that. After that, I would walk by the painting and get a weird feeling which had never happened before. Once again, I woke up at one night and saw my grandma walk into the bathroom. She never came out. I once again asked my grandma, but she said that she couldn't have gotten up that night. I was really confused, but then something happened that made me believe that it was the painting. Usually when I'm in the dark, I can see the painting, but not very well. Again, during the night, I woke up and saw the painting, but with great detail, and as if she was staring at me. I was scared, but I never felt like it was hostile. The next day, I wrote a message on paper, put it behind the painting, to see if I could get a message back from it. I never got a response, and I continued to feel weird around it. After a while, it began to fascinate me, so I asked my grandma if I could have the painting when they pass. She agreed that I can have it. I fully intend on hanging it up in my future home. After a while, the weird thing stopped, but it has never left my mind. Mr. Sandman. It was a random Thursday night in late September and early October, my sophomore year of college. My 3 roommates and I had some of our friends over to the townhouse. We shared for a low-key night of drinking and board games. After a while, the conversation got on the topic of the paranormal and hauntings and stuff. The house I grew up in and my parents still occupied was haunted, so I was sharing some of the crazy stuff we experienced from my childhood. Others began telling crazy stuff like they read online or that they experienced themselves and whatnot. It was one of those semi-drunken, fun conversations that you have in your early 20s, the kind that no one really takes seriously. There was one person who hadn't said a word since the topic of the paranormal had come up. My roommate Jay's girlfriend, Becca. They had been sitting in the corner of the sectional couch with a look of true fear plastered on her face, as if she had remembered something terrible. One of my other roommates asked her what was wrong. "I don't really like talking about this stuff," she replied. We asked her why. She at first was hesitant to get into it, but relented after some more pressing. Here's her story. When Becca was 10, her parents separated, and her mom took her brother, and younger sister to live in this old house that had once been occupied by an elderly couple who had recently passed. The kids did think it was creepy that the previous owners had died, but were reassured by their mom that the people didn't die in the house, but rather at a nursing facility a few miles away. Becca indicated that this put her at ease and that nothing really happened for the first few months or so living there. But after a while, her little sister, who she shared a room with, started acting very, very strange. Becca would wake up in the night to see her sister frozen on all fours on her bed, staring at nothing. She would talk to her new imaginary friends and become increasingly agitated over the smallest things. She refused to eat and began growling and grunting at everyone, even in public. But according to Becca, by far the creepiest thing that she started was singing Mr. Sandman by the Chordettes in this odd voice. Becca couldn't really explain the voice at the time, but assured us that it was creepy. And this was all at the same time, like almost every second of every day. Becca said she'd wake up in the middle of the night with her sister on her bed, frozen on all fours, staring at nothing, singing Mr. Sandman in this strange voice. Their mother at first thought it was a phase and didn't really do much about it. This went on for months until one night Becca woke up to the sounds of her mom screaming. She looked over. Her sister was not in her bed. She bolted to her door and crashed into her brother in the hallway. They looked down the hall to their mom's bedroom and the door was closed. As they started sprinting to the door, it opened and her little sister comes out laughing and talking to her imaginary friend. They barreled past her to their mom's room and asked her what happened. Their mother refused to tell them. All she was doing was crying and telling them to check on their sister. Neither of them wanted to because it was super creepy, so they just ended up sleeping in their mom's room that night. The little sister went back to her room and the entire night was singing Mr. Sandman loudly. The next morning, their dad came over to stay on the couch for a few days. Apparently, he had experienced something similar during one of his weekends with the kids, so he believed their mom. Ultimately, this led to her parents reconciling and the family moving back into their old house with their dad. As soon as they did that, the weird behavior stopped. Becca told us that she can hear Mr. Sandman's song without getting creeped out. Rather, she can't. We were floored, but then Becca went on to blow our minds further. She had proof of some of this at her home in her hometown, which is only about maybe an hour and a half away. Apparently, her little sister liked to record herself singing pop songs and stuff as a kid. It captured something super creepy shortly after they moved in. Becca decided to go home that weekend to get the tape. It was excruciating waiting until she got back Sunday. Sunday night, she came over with the old Talkboy tape recorder. It was the one from Home Alone 2, and the tape. I had that too. You had to listen with headphones because apparently it was pretty faint, so we had to take turns. When it came my turn, I couldn't believe it. The tape starts pretty innocuously. You hear a sink running and dishes clanking against one another. Someone is doing dishes. A woman softly begins humming. It sounds like the mother doing dishes humming to herself. The humming begins to shift into singing. Then it's Mr. Sandman. The woman's voice softly sings, "Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream." Then Becca's sister starts singing, but's messing up all the words. She then says, "Mommy, how does the Mr. Sandman song go?" A different woman's voice speaks. "Well, sweetheart, it goes, Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream." The original woman's voice is still singing at the same time. She then stops and states, "Earl, I think the little one can hear us." The tape then has all three weird growls and static noise, and then cuts out. Baby out of wedlock. When my mom was younger, around 12, she lived in a 3-bedroom house with her older sister, who was 15 at the time, and my grandparents. This house was built on land that had an old well on some sort of marsh. The house is still there now. It's only a few doors up from where she lives now. The story goes that a young girl fell pregnant out of wedlock, wasn't married to the boy that she fell pregnant with. This was back in the day. It was pretty much a huge no-no. So instead of giving the baby up, she decided to throw herself and the newborn down this well. Fast forward years later, and my mom, sister, and parents, they'd been out for the night to a local men's club, family pub type thing. As they walk through the door, the stairs are directly in front of them. They see this young girl sat on the stairs with a baby in her arms. My granddad chased her up the stairs into the smallest bedroom where she disappeared. Most nights they would hear a baby faintly crying or see this young girl in the back garden. A few months after the girl on the stairs, my mom's sister woke up screaming. My mom could clearly see her being pulled down the bed by her legs. My mom jumped up to pull her back, and they found finger marks on her legs. A few other things have happened over the years, but that's a story for another time. We also know the people who live in the house now. They've been there for years, and they hear a baby crying all these years later. I kicked my sleep paralysis demon. To set the scene, it was my wife, V, our 2-year-old Bunny, and myself in a 1-bedroom apartment. Bunny's bed was close to the wall by the door, and our bed was on the other side of the room, but to where I could see Bunny, and I also see the bathroom door, which was located just outside the room. It first started out with minor bad feelings. The usual walk into the apartment and feeling something off, bad vibes all around. One night while we were sleeping, I had awoken to a strange feeling that Bunny was up to something that she shouldn't have been up to. The room is completely dark, so I sit up to have a look around, and almost immediately this small shadow catches my eye. It's Bunny. She's standing at the entrance of the bathroom looking back at me, then proceeded to sidestep into the bathroom out of my view. I start to shake V awake and say to her, "Why is Bunny out of their bed? How'd she climb out?" V, "What are you talking about? Bunny is in the crib asleep." My eyes finally adjusted to the dark, and I see my Bunny sleeping peacefully in their crib. My heart starts picking up pace at this point, and I'm trying to figure out who did I just see walk into her bathroom. So I get out of bed and rush to the bathroom, ready to catch whoever it is. Flip on the light. The bathroom is empty. It's just me staring at my reflection in the mirror. I turn off the light and head back to bed, confused at what just happened, not sure of what I saw. Fast forward a few nights, and I'm still thinking about what happened. There I am in bed next to V with Bunny sound asleep. Again, I wake up to this strange feeling like we're being watched. I open my eyes, my body is still. I feel as though I'm paralyzed, trapped in my own body. Only my eyes move, and I search across the room, and I look at the door to our bedroom, and what I saw made my heart drop. There was this man at our bedroom door. Something about him was off, completely like he was standing on the other world in a man's body. It was more shadow than detail, and his posture was hunched like he was trying to be quiet, like he was stalking his prey. The shadow man begins creeping towards me, lurching closer to our bed. My mind is racing, and I'm thinking, tonight's the night an invader has finally entered our home, and I was the only one awake. I start planning my attack. What I'm going to do is defend my family, but my body's still immobilized. The intruder then does the unthinkable. He places one foot on my bed, then the other. It slowly starts creeping higher and higher up on the bed. He's standing over me, and in a quick moment of fear, I was able to break out and kick both my legs up toward the shadow man, hoping to catch him by surprise. As I kicked up, I felt the weight of my blanket fly off my body. I wasn't going to wait to hear the sound of a thud as he fell back. I was in fight or flight, and my only focus was jumping on this thing and as fast as possible and keeping my family safe. My violent kick wakes up V in a panic. I get up ready to pounce when I see that there's no one there. V, the hell's going on? Me. There's a man in our room. I kicked the shit out of him. He was right there. The room is empty and dark. No man, no intruder, no sound. The silence is broke by my wife telling me to check the rest of the apartment, and after I looked around, there's no one there. I go back to bed and I try to sleep, but my adrenaline's still pumping. So sleep wasn't really on the table. A few months after this event, we decide to move and upgrade to a bigger place. And since moving there, hasn't really been any bad vibes as the apartment, but no shadow man, no little girl, just the three of us, thankfully. Thrown object. A few years ago, my girlfriend and I were laying in bed watching a new movie on a projector that we had just gotten. We had the projector sitting on a table about 2 feet from the edge of the bed. The table was roughly the same height as the bed. The projector was hooked up to my laptop, which was sitting next to it, closed. Right behind the projector was a medium-sized Bluetooth speaker. It's rectangular, about 2 inches tall and deep, about 6 inches long, and probably weighs about 2 pounds. All these things were about as centered on the table as they possibly could be, and they easily had 8 or 10 inches to move on any side of the table. At some point during the movie, I dozed off, which I admit I do far too often, but my girlfriend continued watching the movie, just playing on her phone mostly since I fell asleep. I woke up to her shaking me and yelling, almost in a panic and short of breath. She was yelling about the Bluetooth speaker, but having just woken up, I couldn't really comprehend what she was saying. After I woke up a little more, she was able to tell me what happened. She was on Twitter on her phone, not paying much attention to the movie, but out of nowhere, something hit her ankle hard enough to bruise it and make her draw her leg back. When she looked down, the Bluetooth speaker was sitting there on the floor next to her foot. There's no way the speaker could have fallen in that direction or bounced or anything of that sort. To have hit her ankle would have had to travel almost entirely horizontally for somewhere around 4 feet. Both of us are very interested in paranormal things, but I would consider us both skeptics. Neither of us have ever had any other physically unexplainable occurrences like this. Neither of us have since. We still talk about it pretty frequently. Perhaps the speaker was on your blanket, and since she was on Twitter, completely distracted, and you were asleep, you moved your legs, pulled it up onto the bed with your legs, smacked into her, and fell on the ground. I do believe in ghosts, but that's my 2 cents. Or the ghost doesn't like you not watching the movie. Ghosts in the hallway. This is an experience from when I was younger. Growing up, I always suspected our house was haunted, not only because I experienced strange encounters, but other people who've been to my house have as well, without any prior knowledge of weird experiences there. This particular time I'll never forget because how it made me feel. Still don't quite understand what I saw. Maybe some of you can help. I was 13 years old at the time. My bedroom was upstairs. It was the last bedroom in the hallway to the left. I was sitting on my bed drawing a picture of this girl I kept dreaming about. Her name was Emily. She told me that she had died in a car accident. I figured I was having these dreams because I watched scary movies all the time, so my brain just kind of created its own being. Anyway, the dreams with Emily were pretty consistent. She wasn't demonic or anything like that. I do remember being afraid of her, though, because of how often I dreamt of her. She looked a little older than me. Whenever I dreamt of her, she always was in a forest. Her hair was shoulder-length brown and just parted in the middle. She had light skin, always wore a greenish-gray dress. Whenever I saw her in my dreams, her hair was always super tangled and looked as if she fell down a steep hill or something. So, me being 13 and thinking these dreams maybe meant something, I wanted to start tracking them. That's when I decided to start drawing them out. This was my first day of drawing Emily. I was listening to music on my CD player because I had my door wide open. At the time, I had to keep my door open because it was rude, strict parents. As I finished drawing Emily standing in the middle of the forest, I remember just staring at my drawing. My mom suddenly came in and startled me, then asked what I was drawing, to which I replied, "Nothing, just a dream." She turned around and left. I was touching up Emily's face when all of a sudden I felt almost like a cold wave slithering through my body. It felt like someone had literally froze me in time, and all the surrounding noises just got muffled out, almost like you see during a slow-motion scene in a movie. My immediate reaction was to look up at my door because I thought my mom had done something. When I looked up, I saw a bright white and yellow figure. It had the silhouette of a human, maybe 5'4", 5'6". There weren't any features except for black holes for eyes and a mouth. Almost like a literal emoji, but more realistic sizes. I could only see half of the bright silhouette because it looked like it was grabbing onto the corner wall of the hallway outside my door, as if it were peeking over at me into my room. It did a quick wave, then the black hole for the mouth made the shape of a smile once I realized I was looking straight at it. Then it just peered back into the wall like it had walked away and never saw it again. The whole encounter was probably no more than 15 seconds, but it felt like it went on for 15 minutes. As soon as I saw it, my whole body froze and I just went icy cold. I couldn't even blink. Once it went away, I grabbed my little rosary I had from when I was baptized, which was odd because I wasn't even religious at this time, and yelled for my mom. I was shaking uncontrollably because I was terrified, but I never saw that figure again, nor did I dream of Emily again. To this day, I'm not sure if there was a connection between the two. I always thought if I saw a ghost, I would see the actual person themselves like you do in the movies. Maybe my brain was just playing tricks on me. I'm not sure. I just know I'll never forget that moment.